The Stone of Tyr, the Prophecy Fulfilled, and the Seizure of Callandor. Good evening, and welcome back to the Sleep to Lore series. Tonight we will talk about the Wheel of Time, specifically the events surrounding the great fortress known as the Stone of Tyr. We are going to explore the moment when prophecy crashed into reality in the city of Tyr during the timeline of the third book, The Dragon Reborn. Before we settle in for the story, if you would like to see more of this content, please consider subscribing or leaving a comment to let me know you are here. Before we begin, I have a question for you. If you could visit any fictional city from a book or movie, which one would you choose? Comment your answer below. Now let us transition to the wet and shadowed streets of Tyr. Act 1. The Shadow of the Stone. The city of Tyr was not a happy place. It was a city of heavy air and wet stone. The heat here was different from the dry heat of the Aiel waste or the pleasant warmth of Callandor. Here the heat had weight. It pressed down on your shoulders and filled your lungs with moisture. Even when it rained, the air did not cool down. It just became heavier. The rain in Tyr was frequent, and it turned the unpaved streets of the poorer districts into rivers of grey mud. The smell of the city was the smell of the river, and the smell of fish, and the smell of thousands of people living close together under the grey sky. But dominating everything in the city was the stone. They called it the Stone of Tyr. It was not built like a normal castle or a fortress. It did not have blocks of granite stacked on top of each other with mortar in between. It looked like a mountain that had been melted and shaped by giant hands. That was because it had been built by the One Power during the breaking of the world. Aes Sedai from the Age of Legends had sung to the stone and fused it together into one solid piece. It had no seams, it had no joints. It was massive and grey, and it sat like a brooding beast overlooking the river Erenin. For 3,000 years, the Stone of Tyr had stood there. Armies had thrown themselves against its walls. Great conquerors had tried to siege it. But the stone had never fallen. It was considered impossible to take. The high lords of Tyr ruled from within its belly, and they believed they were safe. They believed that as long as the stone stood, their power was absolute. But inside the heart of that fortress lay a secret that terrified them. Deep within the central chamber of the stone there was a sword. It was not a steel sword, the sword that is not a sword. It was a powerful artifact from the ancient days. The prophecies said that the Stone of Tyr would never fall until the Dragon Reborn held the sword. And the prophecies also said that the Dragon Reborn would be the one to wield it. The High Lords of Tyr hated the dragon. They hated the One Power. They hated Aes Sedai. To them, the prophecy was not a promise of salvation. It was a promise of doom. They guarded the sword not to use it, but to keep anyone else from taking it. They thought if they could keep the sword safe, they could stop the end of the world. They were wrong. The sun was setting over the city and the clouds were gathering for another storm. This storm felt different. The air was charged with static. The hair on your arms would stand up if you walked outside. It was the feeling of tension before a lightning strike, but the feeling lasted for hours. In the muddy streets of the mall, which was the district where the fishermen lived, the people hurried home. They sensed that something was coming. Mat Cauthon walked through these streets. He did not like Tyr, he did not like the smell, and he did not like the High Lords. Mat was a young man who just wanted to play dice and enjoy a good meal and stay away from trouble. But trouble always found him. He had a sensation in his head that felt like dice rolling in a cup. It was a warning. It meant that a major event was about to happen. The dice had been rattling in his skull for days now, and the noise was driving him crazy. Mat was not alone in the city. He had come here with Tom Merrilin, the old gleeman. They were trying to save their friends. Mat had found out that 3 young women he knew were in danger. Elaine, the daughter heir of Callandor, and Egwene and Nynaeve were somewhere in this city. They had come to hunt down dangerous women of the Black Arger, but instead they had walked into a trap. Mat felt a responsibility to get them out. He told himself he was not a hero. He told himself he was just doing it because Elaine's mother would kill him if he didn't. But deep down, he would never leave them behind. Mat looked up at the stone. It towered over the city, casting a long shadow. It looked like a giant finger pointing at the sky. It looked impenetrable. There were no windows on the lower levels. The walls went straight up for hundreds of feet. The gates were guarded by the defenders of the stone, who were the elite soldiers of Tyr. How was one man supposed to get inside? Mat had a plan. It was a crazy plan, but it was the only one he had. He had been looking at the rooftops of the city. He noticed that some of the buildings were built right up against the outer walls of the fortress. If a man could get on those rooftops, he might be able to find a way up. But he needed a distraction. He needed something that would make the guards look the other way. Earlier that day, Mat had wandered through the city and found a woman making fireworks. She was an illuminator. Illuminators were secretive people who made beautiful explosions for festivals. Mat had helped her, and in return, she gave him some of her best works. He had rockets and noisemakers. He touched the pocket of his coat. They were there. He hoped they would be enough. While Mat was planning his break-in, the three women were already inside the stone. But they were not guests. They were prisoners. Nynaeve Almiara was angry. She was furious. She sat on a pile of damp straw in a dark cell deep beneath the fortress. The stone walls here were red and rough. The air was cold and smelled of mold and old fear. Nynaeve tugged on her braid, which was a habit she had when she was agitated. She was angry at the Black Arger for tricking them. She was angry at the High Lords for allowing this. But mostly she was angry at herself. They had been so confident. They thought they were the hunters. They had come to Tyr following clues. They had hired a thief-catcher named Juilin Sandar to help them find the bad women. Juilin was a good man, or so they thought. He knew the streets. He knew the people. But the Black Arger had gotten to him first. They had used the one power to force him to betray the girls. He had led them right into a trap. Nynaeve remembered the moment of capture. It had been sudden. One moment they were walking down a hallway, thinking they were sneaking up on their enemies. The next moment, a shield of air had slammed between them and the true source. For a woman who can channel the one power being shielded is a terrible feeling. It feels like the life is being squeezed out of you. You can sense the power right there. It is like a river of sweet water just out of reach, and you are dying of thirst. But you cannot touch it. You can see it and feel it, but a wall of nothingness blocks you. They had been thrown into this cell. It was designed to hold people who could channel. The door was heavy wood bound with iron. There were no windows. The only light came from a small grate in the door when the guards walked by with torches. Egwene was in the cell with her. Egwene Alvir was younger, but she was strong. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest. She was trying to stay calm. She was trying to touch the dream world. Egwene had a talent. She was a dreamer. She could enter the world of dreams known as Tel'aran'rhiod. In that world, she could move around and see things that were happening in the real world. But it was dangerous. If you get hurt in the dream world, you wake up hurt in the real world. If you die there, you die here. Elaine was pacing the small cell. She was a princess, and she was not used to being locked up. She held her head high, but Nynaeve could see the fear in her eyes. They knew what the Black Arger wanted. They wanted to turn them to the shadow, or maybe use them as bait. The silence in the dungeon was heavy. Occasionally they could hear the drip of water. Occasionally they could hear the heavy boots of a jailer. But mostly they heard their own breathing. They felt the weight of the millions of tons of stone above their heads. They were buried alive. Outside, the storm was finally breaking. Thunder rolled across the sky. It sounded like giant drums being beaten. Lightning flashed and lit up the grey walls of the stone. On the other side of the city, another group had arrived. Moiraine Damodred was an Aes Sedai of the Blue Arger. She was a small woman with dark hair. and huge dark eyes. She looked young, but her eyes were old. She had been searching for the dragon Reborn for 20 years. She had found him in the two rivers. She had guided him and pushed him and protected him. Now she had followed him to Tyr. She rode into the city with Lan Mandragoran, her warder. Lan was a dangerous man. He moved with the grace of a wolf. His face was made of stone angles, and he rarely showed emotion. He wore a color-shifting cloak that made him hard to see. He was always watching for threats. With them was Perrin Ibarra. Perrin was a big young man with curly hair and a beard. He had yellow eyes, golden eyes like a wolf. He tried to hide them, but people noticed. Perrin had a connection to wolves. He could feel them in his mind. He could talk to them. Right now, the wolves were agitated. They hated the stone of Tyr. They called it the Stone Den. They sensed something wrong there, something dark. Moiraine looked up at the fortress. She could feel the presence of the Forsaken. The Forsaken were the ancient channelers who served the Dark One. They had been trapped for 3,000 years, but now they were breaking free. One of them was inside that stone. She was sure of it. Belal. He was waiting. He was weaving a web, and Rand al'Thor was the fly. Rand was already there. He had come to the city alone. He had been running from his friends because he was afraid he would hurt them. He was afraid of the madness. Men who channeled the one power eventually went mad. It was a curse left by the Dark One. Rand could feel the taint on Saidin, the male half of the source. It felt like oil on water. It made him want to vomit every time he reached for the power. But he had to reach for it. He had to fulfill the prophecy. Rand was hiding in the shadows of the city. He was tired. He had walked hundreds of miles. He had fought dark friends and monsters on the way. His clothes were ragged. His eyes were feverish. He looked at the stone and he felt it calling to him. Callandor was calling him. He knew he had to go in. He knew it was a trap. But he also knew that the only way to finish this was to walk into the trap and spring it. The night grew darker. The rain began to fall harder. It was a torrential downpour. The water washed the streets clean. It hammered against the roofs. It drowned out the sound of footsteps. This was perfect for the Aiel. The Aiel were the people of the Waste. They were tall and deadly warriors. They veiled their faces before they killed. They had come over the Dragonwall Mountains in search of the one who was prophesied. They called him the Kara Khan, the chief of chiefs. They believed he was in Tyr. Ruach was a clan chief of the Aiel. He stood on a rooftop overlooking the outer wall of the stone. He was not alone. Hundreds of Aiel were with him. They blended into the night. Their clothes were grey and brown like the earth and the stone. They moved without sound. Even on the wet roof tiles they did not slip. They were like ghosts. The prophecy said that the stone of Tyr would fall when the people of the dragon came. The Aiel called themselves the people of the dragon. But the High Lords of Tyr did not know this. They thought the people of the dragon meant followers of the false dragon. They did not expect an army of desert warriors to scale their walls in the middle of a thunderstorm. Ruach gave a silent signal. The Aiel began to move. They did not use ladders. They found tiny cracks in the stone. They used their fingers and toes. They climbed the vertical walls like spiders. It was impossible for normal men, but the Aiel were not normal men. They flowed up the side of the fortress. The thunder masked the slight sounds of their movement. The lightning revealed them for split seconds, hundreds of figures clinging to the wall, but the guards were looking down at the ground or huddling out of the rain. They never looked up. Back in the city, Mat Cauthon was ready. He had found a spot near the kitchen chimneys of the fortress. The wall here was rough. There was a scaffold that had been left by some workers. It didn't reach all the way up, but it reached high enough. Mat checked his quarterstaff. It was a long wooden staff made of ash. He was deadly with it. He checked his pockets for the fireworks. He lit a small match and shielded it from the rain with his hand. He lit the fuse of a large rocket. He aimed it at an arrow slit high up on the wall. He waited. The fuse hissed. Then, with a whoosh and a shriek, the rocket flew. It hit the stone and exploded. Boom! A flash of red and green light. Then he lit another and another. He threw the noisemakers over the wall into the courtyard. Bang! Crack! Whistle! Inside the fortress, chaos erupted. The defenders of the stone panicked. They had never seen fireworks before. They thought they were being attacked by Aes Sedai. They thought the One Power was blasting the walls. Attack! Someone screamed. Sorcery! We are under attack! The guards ran toward the explosions. They left their posts. They ran toward the noise. This was Mat's chance. He scrambled up the scaffold. He pulled himself up to a window. He squeezed through. He was inside. The interior of the stone was vast. The hallways were wide enough for 10 men to walk abreast. The ceilings were lost in shadows. The stone was red and gold and grey. Tapestries hung on the walls depicting great battles of the past. Statues of old kings glared down at him. Mat ran. He did not know exactly where the girls were, but his luck was pulling him. He felt a tug in his gut. Left here, right there, down these stairs. He passed a group of servants running the other way, screaming about explosions. They didn't even see him. He passed a guard who was fumbling with his sword belt. Mat cracked him on the head with his staff as he ran by. The guard crumpled. Mat didn't stop. The dice in his head were thundering now. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum. They were rolling and rolling. He knew he was getting close to the center of the web. Deep below in the cells, Nynaeve heard the dull thumps of the explosions. She looked at the ceiling. What was that? Elaine whispered. Thunder? Egwene asked, but she didn't sound convinced. No, Nynaeve said. She stood up. That didn't sound like thunder. That sounded like something else. Suddenly, the door to their cell block burst open. It wasn't a guard. It was a woman. She wore the black dress of a high lady of Tyr, but her face was twisted with fear and anger. It was one of the Black Arger. Get up! She screamed at them through the bars. You are coming with us. If the stone falls, you will die first. She began to unlock the cell door. She held the One Power ready to strike them if they moved. But then something strange happened. The woman's eyes went wide. She gasped and arched her back. She dropped the keys. She fell forward onto her face. Behind her stood a man in a wet coat, holding a quarterstaff. He had a scarf wrapped around his neck, and a wide-brimmed hat dripping with rain. It was Mat. He kicked the unconscious woman aside and picked up the keys. He grinned at them through the bars. You look like you could use a hand, he said. Nynaeve stared at him. She could not believe it. Mat Cauthon, the irresponsible gambler, the boy they always had to look after. He had broken into the most secure fortress in the world to save them. Mat, Elaine said, is that really you? Open the door, Mat, Nynaeve snapped, recovering her wits. Before she wakes up. Mat unlocked the door. The moment it swung open, the shield on them vanished. The Black Arger woman had been the one holding it or tying it off. When she was knocked out, her weave unraveled. Nynaeve gasped as the true source flooded back into her. It was like breathing fresh air after being underwater. She embraced the Saidar. She filled herself with the power. She felt the flows of air and fire and spirit. Where are the others? She asked Mat. I don't know, Mat said. I'm just here for you. We need to go, now. But they were not safe yet. They were still deep in the stone, and the fortress was waking up. Up above, the Aiel had crested the walls. They dropped into the courtyards like silent rain. The defenders of the stone were confused. They were running toward the fireworks, but now they found themselves fighting veiled warriors in their own halls. The sound of steel on steel rang out. The Aiel spears danced. The Tyren swords flashed. But the Tyren soldiers were slow and armored. The Aiel were fast and unarmored. It was a massacre. Ruark led his men toward the lower levels. They had a mission. They were not just here to conquer. They were looking for the signs. They were clearing the way. And in the middle of all this confusion, Rand al'Thor entered the stone. He did not climb the walls like the Aiel. He did not blow a hole in the wall like Mat. He simply walked through the chaos. He was holding saidin. The power filled him with a glorious filth. It made his senses sharp. He could see the weaves of the enemy. He moved through the corridors. He saw soldiers fighting Aiel, and he ignored them. He saw servants hiding in alcoves, and he ignored them. He was focused on one thing, the pull. It was a physical sensation, a tug in his navel. It was pulling him toward the center of the fortress, toward the heart of the stone. He knew what was there, the sword. But he also knew who was there, the Forsaken. Rand turned a corner and found himself in a massive hallway lined with pillars. The red stone seemed to pulse. The air here was vibrating. He could feel the power being used ahead. He began to run. He did not run like a man fleeing. He ran like a man hunting. He had his own sword at his hip, a heron-marked blade he had earned. But he knew steel would not be enough tonight. The madness whispered in his ear. Kill them all. Burn them. You are the dragon. No, Rand whispered to himself. I am just a shepherd. But he wasn't. Not anymore. As he ran, he passed a mirror on the wall. He saw his reflection. He looked wild. His red hair was matted with rain. His eyes were wide. He looked dangerous. He reached the great doors of the heart of the stone. They were massive bronze doors engraved with dragons. They stood slightly ajar. A cold wind blew from inside. It smelled of ozone and ancient dust. Rand pushed the doors open. The chamber inside was enormous. The ceiling was lost in the gloom. Rows of massive red stone columns marched into the distance. And there in the center, bathed in a spotlight of its own making, was the sword. Callandor. It was beautiful. It looked like glass, but it felt like power. It hummed. But standing between Rand and the sword was a man. He was tall and handsome, with dark hair and a cruel smile. He wore black velvet and silver. He looked like a high lord, but his eyes were too knowledgeable. They were eyes that had seen the age of legends. Welcome, the man said. His voice echoed in the vast chamber. I have been waiting for you. It was Belal, the netweaver, one of the Forsaken. Rand stopped. He held saidin tight. He prepared a weave of fire. You are late, Belal said, drawing a sword. His sword was black. It looked like it was made of shadows. I was beginning to think you wouldn't come. I was beginning to think I would have to come find you. I am here, Rand said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. It was flat and hard. Good, Belal smiled. Take the sword. Take it. It is yours. You want it, don't you? It will give you the power to destroy me. Take it. Rand hesitated. He knew it was a trap. Belal wanted him to take the sword. Why? Because of the wards. The sword was protected. Only the dragon Reborn could touch it without dying. Belal could not take it himself. He needed Rand to take it out of the trap. Then he would kill Rand and take the sword from his dead hands. I don't need the sword to kill you, Rand said. He threw a weave of fire at the Forsaken. A bar of white-hot flame roared across the room. Belal laughed. He casually sliced the weave with his sword of shadow. The fire vanished. Is that the best you can do, Luz Therin? Belal mocked, using the name of the dragon from the previous age. You are a child playing with a candle. I was a master of the sword before your great-grandfathers were born. Come, fight me. Rand drew his heron-marked sword. He stepped forward. The duel began. It was a dance of death. Belal was fast, incredibly fast. His black blade moved like a whip. Rand blocked and parried, but he was being driven back. He was good with a sword. He had been trained by Lan. But Belal had centuries of experience. Clang, clang. The sound of steel on shadow rang through the heart of the stone. Rand was sweating. He was panting. He tried to use the one power to trip Belal to blind him, but Belal cut every weave. He was toying with Rand. Take the sword, Belal shouted. Use Callandor. It is the only way you can defeat me. Rand was being pushed closer and closer to the floating crystal sword. He could feel its heat. He could feel the temptation. If he grabbed it, he would have power beyond anything he could imagine. He could crush Belial in an instant. But he resisted. He fought on with his steel blade. Suddenly a voice cut through the noise of the fight. "Belial!" The Forsaken turned. Rand paused, gasping for breath. Standing in the shadows near the columns was Moiraine. She looked small and frail against the giant architecture, but she held her staff high. Her face was calm. Belial sneered. "An Aes Sedai. You think you can stop me, little gnat? I am one of the chosen." "You are a fool," Moiraine said. She did not shout. She simply spoke, and then she acted. She did not use fire. She did not use lightning. She used a forbidden weave. A weave that had been banned even in the Age of Legends because it was too dangerous. Balefire. A bar of liquid white light shot from her hands. It was brighter than the sun. It made no sound. It crossed the distance in an instant. It hit Belial in the chest. There was no explosion. There was no scream. Belial simply ceased to exist. The light burned him out of the pattern. He didn't just die. He was erased. His sword fell to the ground and vanished. His body turned into motes of light and was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Rand stared at the spot where the Forsaken had been. He looked at Moiraine. "Moiraine?" he whispered. She lowered her staff. She looked exhausted. "It is done," she said. "But we are not finished." She was right. As Rand caught his breath, the air in the center of the room began to shimmer. A darkness formed. It was not a shadow. It was a hole in reality. From that darkness stepped a figure. His face was a mask of burns. His eyes were caverns of fire. He wore clothes that looked like dried blood. It was Ba'alzamon, the Dark One, or at least the man who called himself the Dark One. He looked at Moiraine. He raised a hand. He did not weave a complex spell. He simply swatted her with the power like a man swatting a fly. Moiraine flew backward. She hit a stone pillar with a sickening crunch and slumped to the floor. She did not move. Rand screamed. "No!" He charged at Ba'alzamon, but the dark figure laughed. He raised a hand and Rand was thrown backward. He slid across the polished floor. "You cannot fight me!" Ba'alzamon roared. His voice sounded like stones grinding together. "You are nothing. I have won again and again in 1,000 lives. You are just a worm." Rand struggled to his feet. He was hurt. He was bleeding. Moiraine was down. The Aiel were fighting outside, but they couldn't help him here. He was alone. He looked at Ba'alzamon. Then he looked at the crystal sword floating above him. He had no choice. He reached out. His hand closed around the hilt of Callandor. The moment he touched it, the world changed. A shockwave of power slammed into him. It was not the trickle of power he usually felt. It was an ocean. It was a tidal wave. The Sidon flowed into him through the sword. It was amplified 1,000 times. The stone of Tyr shook. The very foundations of the mountain trembled. Rand lifted the sword. It blazed with white light. It was so bright it was hard to look at. The glass blade became a beacon. "I am the dragon reborn," Rand shouted. His voice was amplified by the power. It boomed through the entire fortress. It boomed through the city outside. Ba'alzamon stepped back. For the first time there was doubt in his fiery eyes. Rand swung the sword. He did not cut with steel. He cut with the one power. A wave of light slashed toward the dark figure. Ba'alzamon blocked it with a shield of darkness. The impact was like a nuclear explosion contained in a bottle. The air screamed. Rand pressed forward. He was drunk on the power. He felt like he could crush the world in his hand, but he focused it all on the enemy in front of him. "You are done," Rand yelled. He drove the sword forward. He chased Ba'alzamon. The dark figure tried to flee. He tried to step into the dream world. He tried to open a gateway. But Rand followed. The sword could cut through anything. It could cut through the fabric of worlds. Rand cornered him. Baalzamon raised his hands in a final defense. Rand thrust Callandor forward. The crystal blade pierced the dark chest. It went through the heart. Baalzamon screamed. It was a scream that echoed in the minds of every person in Tyr. The dark figure convulsed. The fire in his eyes went out. He fell to the ground. He was just a man, a dead man. The storm outside stopped instantly. The rain ceased. The clouds broke apart. Rand stood there panting. He held the sword. It was still glowing, but the light was fading to a soft hum. He looked down at the body. It was shriveled. It looked like it had been dead for years. The doors to the chamber burst open. Mat ran in holding his quarterstaff. Behind him were Egwene and Elaine and Nynaeve. They were disheveled, but alive. Behind them came Ruark and the Aiel. They stopped. They stared. They saw Rand standing in the center of the room. They saw the crystal sword in his hand. They saw the dead Forsaken. They saw Moiraine stirring groggily against the pillar. Slowly, silently, Ruark knelt. The other Aiel knelt behind him. "The Kara Khan," Ruark whispered. Then the Tyran High Lords who had been dragged in by the Aiel saw it too. They saw the sword was gone from its place. They saw the boy holding it. They fell to their knees. Not out of respect, but out of fear. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The stone had fallen. The dragon was reborn. Rand looked at them. He felt tired. More tired than he had ever felt in his life. He lowered the sword. The war was not over. In fact, it had just begun. But tonight the shadow had been pushed back. As the first light of dawn crept through the high windows of the stone, it illuminated the red stone columns. It illuminated the faces of his friends. Rand al'Thor sheathed the sword that is not a sword. The world would never be the same. Part 2. The storm breaks. The night had become a living thing. Above the city of Tyr, the sky was not just dark, it was heavy. It felt like a thick wool blanket, soaked in freezing water, had been dropped over the world. The clouds churned and boiled. They were blacker than the space between the stars. Every few seconds, the sky would tear open with a flash of violet light. The lightning did not just flash, it lingered. It burned the image of the city into the eyes of anyone watching. For a second, you could see every tile on every roof and every ripple in the mud of the streets. Then the darkness would snap back even blacker than before. The thunder was constant. It did not roll away. It stayed right on top of the city. It shook the teeth in your head. It rattled the shutters of the houses. The dogs in the city were hiding under beds, whimpering. The horses in the stables were kicking at their stalls. The animals knew that this was not a normal storm. This was a storm born of the Dark One's touch on the world. It was a storm that signaled the breaking of an age. At the base of the great stone of Tyr, the shadows were moving. Ruark pressed his body against the wet stone of the outer wall. The rain was falling so hard it was difficult to breathe. It ran down his face and soaked into his veil. He could taste the water and the dust of the stone. The wall was slick. It was smooth in places and rough in others. To a normal man, this wall was impossible. It went straight up into the dark. It was hundreds of feet high. There were no handholds. There were no ledges. But Ruark was Aiel. He was of the Tardad Aiel. He had lived his life in the threefold land where death waited behind every rock. Climbing a wall was not impossible. It was just a problem to be solved. He reached up. His fingers found a tiny crack in the masonry. It was no wider than a coin. It was enough. He tested it. He put his weight on it. His muscles bunched under his wet clothes. He pulled himself up. His soft boots found friction on the wet stone. He moved up 1 foot, then another. He was not alone. To his left and to his right, other shadows were moving. Hundreds of them. They were the Aiel. They climbed in silence. They did not grunt with effort. They did not curse the rain. They did not clank or rattle because they carried no heavy armor. They carried only their spears and their bucklers and their curved knives. They were weapons made of flesh and bone. The thunder crashed again. Boom! Ruark used the noise. He timed his movements. When the thunder roared, he moved fast. If a stone came loose and fell, it would not be heard over the storm. He looked up. The top of the wall was a jagged line against the lightning. He saw the helmet of a guard. The guard was huddled under an overhang trying to stay dry. The guard was looking into the courtyard, not over the wall. Why would he look over the wall? The wall was unclimbable. The stone had never fallen. The guard felt safe. That safety was his weakness. Ruark reached the top. He held onto the edge of the parapet. He waited. He watched the guard's breathing. He watched the rain dripping off the guard's metal shoulder plate. Then Ruark moved. He vaulted over the wall. He landed softly like a cat landing on a pillow. He was behind the guard before the man knew he was there. Ruark did not want to kill if he did not have to, but this was war. He struck. The guard slumped. Ruark caught him before his armor could clang against the stone floor. He lowered the man gently. He signaled to the others. One by one, the Aiel flowed over the wall. They gathered in the shadows of the ramparts. They were inside. The impenetrable fortress had been penetrated, but this was only the outer wall. The stone of Tyr was huge. It was a city within a city. There were courtyards and gardens and barracks and armories, and in the center rose the great citadel itself, the heart of the stone. Ruark looked at his men. He used hand signals. Spread out, secure the gates, find the way down. They moved out. They were like smoke in a strong wind. They disappeared into the corridors. On the other side of the fortress, Mat Cauthon was having a different kind of trouble. He was inside the wall now. He was in a corridor that smelled of old wax and roasted meat. He had blown a hole in the wall with the fireworks, but now he was lost. The stone was a maze. The hallways twisted and turned. Some went up and some went down. There were stairs that seemed to lead nowhere. The architecture was confusing. It was made by the one power, so it did not follow the rules of normal building. The angles were strange. The ceilings were too high. Mat stopped at a corner. He pressed his back against the red stone. He was breathing hard. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He gripped his ash quarterstaff. His knuckles were white. The dice in his head were going crazy. Rattle. 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 It was a sound only he could hear. It sounded like stones tumbling inside a wooden cup. It meant luck. It meant fate. It meant he was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the wind was blowing. Blood and ashes, Mat whispered to himself. Which way? He closed his eyes for a second. He tried to feel the tug. He let his instinct take over. He let the luck guide him. He turned left. He ran down a long hallway lined with tapestries. The tapestries were old and dusty. They showed kings hunting lions and armies marching to war. The eyes of the woven figures seemed to watch him as he ran. He heard shouting ahead. The fireworks in the lower yard. Go, go! A squad of defenders of the stone came running around the corner. They wore black and gold surcoats over their mail. Their helmets were polished. They had swords drawn. They saw Mat. Mat stopped. He looked at them. They looked at him. He looked like a ragged beggar compared to them. His coat was wet and muddy. His hat was dripping, but he held his staff like he knew how to use it. "You there!" the sergeant shouted. "Halt!" Mat didn't halt. He grinned. It was a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just passing through," Mat said. "Don't mind me." The sergeant charged. "Take him." There were 5 of them. 5 armored soldiers against one boy with a stick. Mat spun the staff. It made a low humming sound. The sergeant swung his sword. Mat sidestepped. He moved just an inch. The sword passed harmlessly by his chest. Mat brought the end of the staff up. Crack. It hit the sergeant under the chin. The helmet flew off. The sergeant dropped. The other 4 hesitated. They had not expected that speed. Mat didn't wait. He stepped into them. The staff was a blur. He hit a knee, he hit a wrist, he hit a temple. He moved like water. He used their own weight against them. He tripped one man and sent him crashing into another. Within 10 seconds, all 5 men were on the floor, groaning. Mat spun the staff again and rested it on his shoulder. He adjusted his hat. "I told you I was just passing through," he muttered. He stepped over them and kept running. The dice were tumbling louder now. He was getting closer. He could feel it. The girls were near. Deep in the belly of the stone, the air was still. It was heavy and dead. The storm outside could not be heard here. Here there was only the silence of the dungeon. Egwene Alvea sat in the corner of the cell. She was trying to ignore the damp straw. She was trying to ignore the fear that was gnawing at her stomach. She held a stone ring in her hand. It was a terangreal. It was a twisted ring of speckled stone. It had no beginning and no end. It was a tool for entering the world of dreams. "Egwene," Elaine whispered, "are you sure about this?" Elaine Trakand was the daughter heir of Andor. She was brave and she was proud, but she was also practical. "If they come in while you are asleep, we have no choice," Egwene said softly. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were firm. "We are shielded. I cannot touch the source. I cannot burn the door down, but they cannot shield my dreams." It was a theory. She didn't know if it was true, but she had to try. "Watch the door," Egwene said. "If you hear them coming, wake me up. Shake me hard." "I will," Nynaeve said. Nynaeve was pacing again. She looked like a caged lioness. "I will break their heads if they come in." Egwene closed her eyes. She focused on the stone ring. She focused on the sleep. It was hard. Her heart was racing. How can you sleep when you are terrified? How can you sleep when you are in a stone box? She used a breathing exercise Nynaeve had taught her years ago. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, slow the heart, clear the mind. Slowly the sounds of the cell faded, the smell of the mold faded, the darkness behind her eyelids began to shift. She drifted, she fell, and then she was standing. She was still in the cell, but it was different. The light was sharper, the shadows were deeper, the stone walls looked solid, but also strange. If she looked too closely at them, they seemed to shift. This was Tel'aran'rhiod, the unseen world. She looked at herself. She was wearing her novice dress. Then she thought, "No, I am a woman grown." Her dress changed instantly to a fine silk gown of green. That was the danger of this place. Your thoughts became reality instantly. If you thought of a monster would appear. If you thought you were falling, you would fall. You had to have a mind of iron. She looked at the corner. Elaine and Nynaeve and her own sleeping body were there. But they looked misty. They looked like ghosts. They were part of the waking world. She was now part of the dream. Egwene walked to the door. In the waking world it was locked and barred. In the dream world she simply imagined it open. The door is open, she thought. The lock clicked. The heavy wood swung outward. She stepped into the hallway. It was empty. The torches on the walls burned with a strange blue fire. The hallway stretched out longer than it should be. She had to find the key, or she had to find the jailer, or she had to find help. She began to run. In the dream, she could run without getting tired. She glided over the floor. She saw a guard standing at the end of the corridor. He looked bored. He was leaning on his spear. Egwene focused on him. "He cannot see me." She walked right past him. He stared straight through her. To him, she was just a draft of air. She went up the stairs. She needed to find out where they were. She needed to see the layout of the fortress. She reached a balcony overlooking a great hall. What she saw stopped her cold. The hall was filled with shadows, but they were not normal shadows. They were twisting and writhing. And in the center of the hall stood a woman. It was Amiko Nagoyan. one of the Black Arja. But in the dream, Amiko looked monstrous. She was huge. She was standing over a map of the stone. She was moving little figures around. Egwene hid behind a pillar. She realized with a jolt of horror that she wasn't the only one touching the dream. The Black Arja were using the dream too. Or maybe their evil was just leaking into it. Amiko turned. Her eyes swept the balcony. Egwene held her breath. I am a stone, she thought. I am a part of the wall. Amiko's gaze passed over her. Egwene realized she couldn't fight them here. Not yet. She wasn't strong enough in the dream. She needed to go back. She needed to tell the others that the key was on the guard's belt. She had seen it. A big ring of iron keys on the guard at the end of the hall. She closed her eyes in the dream. She pinched her own arm. Wake up, she commanded herself. Wake up. The dream dissolved into mist. She gasped and sat up in the straw. Egwene? Elaine asked. I saw them, Egwene panted. The keys. There is a guard at the end of the hall. He has the keys. That doesn't help us much, Nynaeve muttered. Unless we can ask him politely to bring them here. At least we know where they are, Egwene said. If we can lure him... Shh, Elaine hissed. Listen. Footsteps. Not the heavy boots of a guard. These were quick, light steps. And the tapping of a stick. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps stopped outside their door. A face appeared in the small barred window. A familiar face with a grin under a wide-brimmed hat. Mat, Elaine cried out. Egwene stared. She thought she might still be dreaming. Mat Cauthon? Here? The events that followed happened fast. Mat unlocked the door. The rush of the one power returning to them was dizzying. Egwene felt the source fill her like light filling a dark room. The shield was gone, but the danger was not. We have to go, Mat said. The whole place is waking up. There are Aiel everywhere. Aiel? Nynaeve asked. Here? It's a long story, Mat said. Let's move. They stepped out of the cell. But as they did, the air at the end of the hall shimmered. Two women stepped out of the shadows. They wore the silks of high ladies, but their faces were cold and hard. Black Arja. One of them was Liandrin. Her golden hair was perfect. Her rosebud mouth was set in a sneer. Going somewhere? Liandrin asked. She raised her hand. Egwene could feel the woman embracing the source. She saw the flows of air and spirit being woven. She was preparing to shield them again, or worse, to hurt them. No! Egwene shouted. She reached for Saidar. She was faster this time. She didn't think about weaves. She just threw her power at Liandrin. She wove flows of air. She wrapped them around Liandrin like invisible ropes. Liandrin's eyes went wide. She had not expected them to be free. She struggled against the air. She lashed out with a weave of fire. A ball of flame roared down the hallway. Mat stepped forward. He spun his staff. He didn't know what he was doing, but his luck drove him. He caught the fire with the staff. No, that was impossible. But the medallion. Mat had a silver fox-head medallion around his neck. He had gotten it from the eelfin. It hung under his shirt against his chest. The fire hit the air in front of Mat and dissipated. It vanished. The medallion grew cold against his skin. What? Liandrin screamed. Mat charged. Don't let her weave, Nynaeve yelled. Nynaeve was powerful. When she was angry, she was one of the strongest channelers alive. And right now she was very angry. She slammed a shield between Liandrin and the source. It was a hard, brutal wedge of spirit. Liandrin gasped. The power was cut off from her. She was just a woman now. The other Black Sister tried to run. Elaine caught her. She wove flows of air and lifted the woman off her feet. She slammed her against the wall. The woman slumped unconscious. Liandrin looked at Mat running toward her. She looked at the three angry women glowing with the one power. She turned and fled. She ran back into the shadows. Let her go, Mat said, breathing hard. We don't have time to chase her. We need to get out. "We are not leaving without the others," Nynaeve said. "There are other prisoners." "Fine," Mat groaned, "but be quick about it." While the girls were freeing the other prisoners and Mat was keeping watch, Rand al'Thor was climbing the stairs to the upper levels. He was alone. The fever was burning him up inside. Every step was a struggle. His legs felt like lead. His head was pounding. The sickness of the taint was strong here. The stone was old. It remembered the power. It resonated with it. And it was reacting to the vast amount of Sidin Rand was holding. He was holding on to the source by a thread. He was afraid to let go and afraid to draw more. "Lose Therin," a voice whispered in his mind. Rand shook his head. "Get out," he muttered. "You are not real." "They are waiting for us," the voice giggled. "The shadow is waiting. Do you remember the last time we fought him? The sky burned." "Shut up," Rand growled. He stumbled. He caught himself on the wall. The stone felt hot under his hand. He looked up the stairs. They seemed to go on forever. He wasn't fighting guards. The guards he passed were either running toward the Aiel, or they took one look at his face and ran away. Rand looked terrifying. He looked like death walking. His eyes were wide and staring. His skin was pale. He had his sword in his hand, but he dragged the tip on the ground. The real fight was inside. He felt the pull of Callandor. It was singing to him. It was a crystal-clear note that cut through the madness. "Come, come to me. Take me." It promised relief. It promised power. It promised that if he held it, he would be strong enough to stop the voices. He would be strong enough to save everyone. "I'm coming," Rand whispered. He forced his legs to move. 1 step, 2 steps. Suddenly, a Murdral stepped out of the shadows at the top of the stairs. The Fade was pale and eyeless. Its cloak hung still, even though the wind from the arrow slits was blowing. It smiled with a mouth full of sharp teeth. "The Lord Dragon," the Fade hissed. Its voice was like dry leaves sliding on rock. Rand didn't stop. He didn't raise his sword. He looked at the Fade. He channeled. He didn't use fire. He used earth. The stone step under the Fade exploded. Sharp shards of rock flew upward. The Fade moved with unnatural speed, but not fast enough. The stone shrapnel tore into its legs. It hissed in pain. Rand followed up with air. He hit the Fade with a hammer of solid air. It flew backward and smashed into the wall. It slid down, leaving a black smear. Rand kept walking. He stepped over the twitching body of the Fade. He didn't even look down. He was focused. He was a weapon now. He was being honed by the pattern for this one moment. He reached the top of the stairs. He was in the great antechamber before the heart of the stone. The doors were ahead, massive, bronze. He could feel the presence inside. He could feel the Forsaken. His stomach twisted. Fear, cold, icy fear. He was a shepherd from the 2 rivers. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a lord. He was just a boy who wanted to go home and tend his sheep. But he couldn't go home. Home was gone. The past was gone. "I have to do this," he said to the empty air. He pushed the doors open. Back in the lower levels, the battle was turning. The Aiel had secured the gates. They had opened the main portcullis. More Aiel were pouring in from the city. The defenders of the stone were overwhelmed. They were fighting bravely, but they were fighting a force of nature. Ruark stood in the main courtyard. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick with water and blood. He saw the fireworks that Mat had set off earlier. The remnants of the rockets lay smoking on the wet stones. "Strange weapons," Ruark muttered. A young Aiel maiden ran up to him. She was breathing hard, but she was grinning behind her veil. "The lower levels are ours," she said. "We found prisoners, Aes Sedai, and the wetlander with the luck." "Mat Cauthon?" Ruark asked. "Yes, he has the women. They are safe." Ruark nodded. "Good. Then we push up. The Karakan is above. I can feel it." He looked up at the massive central tower of the stone. Lights were flashing in the high windows. Strange lights. Not torchlight, but flashes of white and blue. The one power was being used up there. The battle of the gods had begun. "We go up," Ruark commanded. "We secure the halls. Let no one interfere with him." The Aiel surged forward. They ran up the stairs. They ran toward the destiny that had been promised to them for 3,000 years. In the heart of the stone, Rand al'Thor walked into the light. The room was vast. It was like a cathedral built for giants. The columns were red stone, polished until they shone like mirrors. The floor was a mosaic of gold and red, and there it was, Callandor. It floated in the air. It was about chest high. It was a longsword made of crystal. It was perfectly clear. It caught the light of the torches and scattered it into rainbows. It rotated slowly. It was the most beautiful thing Rand had ever seen, and the most terrifying. He took a step toward it. "Stop," a voice said. Belial stepped out from behind a pillar. The Forsaken looked regal. He looked like a king. He held his black sword casually. "So you have come," Belial said. "I knew you would. The bait was too sweet." Rand stopped. He gripped his heron-marked sword. "I am not here for you," Rand said. "Oh, but you are," Belial laughed. "You are here because I willed it. You are here because I pulled the strings. Do you think it was luck that brought you here? Do you think it was chance?" Belial began to walk in a circle around Rand. "I woven the web," Belial said. "I brought the girl here to draw you. I allowed the little thief to enter. I allowed the Aiel to climb the walls. It is all part of the game." "Why?" Rand asked. "Because I cannot touch it." Belial pointed his sword at Callandor. "The trap is set for you, but if you take it, then the trap is sprung, and I can take it from your corpse." Rand looked at the crystal sword. It was so close. 10 paces. "You think you can kill me?" Rand asked. "I know I can," Belial said. "I am the master of the blade. I was winning duels while you were rotting in the womb of time. Draw your power, boy. Let us see what you have." Rand reached for Sidin. The sickness hit him hard. He staggered. Belial laughed. "Is that it? Is that the dragon reborn? A sick puppy vomiting on the floor?" Rand straightened up. Anger burned the sickness away. He channeled fire. The duel began. But this was not just a physical duel. It was a duel of wills. Rand struck with the sword and with the power. Belial parried both. The Forsaken was playing with him. He was goading him. "Take the sword," Belial shouted. "It is the only way." Rand felt the pressure. He felt the temptation. But he also felt something else. He felt Moiraine entering the room. He didn't see her at first. But he felt the female half of the source. Saidar. It was different from Sidin. It was cool and smooth. Moiraine was hiding in the shadows. She was watching. She was waiting for her moment. Rand realized he wasn't alone. He had help. He just had to stay alive long enough for that help to arrive. He parried a blow that would have taken his head off. He rolled across the floor. He came up, crouching. "Come on," Rand yelled. "Is that all you have?" Belial's face twisted in rage. "You insolent insect!" The Forsaken charged. The air in the room crackled. The tension was at its breaking point. The storm outside had stopped, but the storm inside was just reaching its peak. The stone of Tyr was about to fall, and the world was holding its breath. Part 3. The Heart of the Stone. The room was vast. It was so big that the ceiling was lost in the shadows above. It felt less like a room and more like a canyon carved out of red rock. The columns that held up the roof were massive. They were 50 feet thick. They were polished until they gleamed like wet blood in the torchlight. This was the heart of the stone. It was the center of the fortress. It was the center of the city. And tonight, it was the center of the world. In the middle of this great hall, the air seemed to hum. It was a sound that you felt in your teeth more than you heard with your ears. It was the sound of power. Floating there in the empty air was the sword, Callandor. It was made of crystal. It was clear and pure. It looked like water frozen into the shape of a blade. It slowly rotated, round and round. It had no support. There were no wires. There was no pedestal. It just hung there waiting. Rand al'Thor stared at it. He was tired. His chest was heaving. He wiped sweat from his forehead. The air in the room was hot and dry. It smelled of ozone and ancient dust. Between him and the sword stood Balal. The Forsaken looked calm. He looked like a man who had all the time in the world. He was dressed in black velvet with silver embroidery. The silver looked like spider webs catching the light. He held his black sword in one hand. The blade was made of shadows. It seemed to drink the light from the torches. "You are hesitating," Balal said. His voice echoed off the red stone columns. "Why do you hesitate, Luz Therin? The prize is right there. All you have to do is reach out and take it." Rand gripped his own sword. It was a heron-marked blade made of steel. It was a good sword, but against a weapon made of the one power, it was like a twig. "I know what you want," Rand said. His voice was raspy. "You want me to break the wards. You cannot touch it yourself." Balal smiled. It was a cold smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "You are clever. For a shepherd. Yes, the wards are keyed to you. Only the dragon can touch Callandor. Only the dragon can wield it. But once you take it, well, then it is just a sword. A very powerful sword. And I can take a sword from a dead man easily enough." Rand shifted his feet. He was looking for an opening. But Balal was perfect. His stance was flawless. He was a master of the sword from an age when sword fighting was an art form. "We don't have to do this," Rand said. "You could leave. You could go back to the shadow." Balal laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Leave and miss the fun. I have waited 3,000 years for this moment. I have spun my webs. I have manipulated the High Lords of Tyr. I have baited the trap. And now the mouse is here. I am not going anywhere." He stepped forward. He moved so fast it was a blur. Rand reacted on instinct. He raised his sword to block. Clang. The impact shook Rand to his bones. Sparks flew where the shadow blade met the steel. Rand was driven back. His boots slid on the polished floor. Balal struck again. A high cut, a low cut, a thrust. Rand parried, dodged. He was fighting for his life. Every muscle in his body was screaming. He was using the void. It was a mental technique Lan had taught him. He fed his fear and his exhaustion into a flame in his mind. He made himself empty. He became pure reaction. But it wasn't enough. Balal was too fast. He was too strong. "Is this it?" Balal taunted. He swatted Rand's sword aside with a lazy flick of his wrist. "Is this the champion of the light? You are pathetic. You are a child waving a stick." Rand gritted his teeth. He reached for Saidin. The male half of the true source was there just out of sight. It was like a raging river of fire and ice. He reached for it, and the sickness hit him. The taint of the Dark One coated the power. It felt like grease. It felt like rot. He fought through the nausea. He seized the power. He wove a bar of air. He swung it like a club at Balal. Balal didn't even flinch. He sliced the air with his black sword. The weave unraveled. It vanished. "Child's play," Balal sneered. "I was mastering these weaves when you were nothing but a possibility in the pattern. You cannot defeat me with the power. You cannot defeat me with the sword. You have only one choice." He pointed his sword at the crystal blade floating behind Rand. "Take it," Balal commanded. "Take Callandor. It will give you the strength. It will amplify your power 1,000 times. With that sword, you could crush me. You could burn me from existence. Why do you resist?" Rand looked at the sword. The temptation was overwhelming. He could feel the power coming off it. It was like standing next to a furnace. If he took it, he would be unstoppable. He could end this fight in a second. But he knew it was exactly what the Forsaken wanted. "No," Rand said. He attacked again. He drove forward with his steel sword. He used every ounce of skill he had. He feinted left and struck right. Belial blocked it effortlessly. He kicked Rand in the chest. Rand flew backward. He hit the floor hard. His sword skittered away across the tiles. He lay there gasping for air. His ribs felt broken. The taste of blood was in his mouth. Belial walked toward him slowly. He raised his black sword for the killing blow. "A pity," Belial said. "I hoped for a better fight. I hoped you would be more. But you are just a man. Goodbye, Luz Therin." Rand tried to get up. He tried to weave a shield, but he was too slow. The black sword was coming down. Then suddenly a voice spoke from the shadows. "Belial." It was a woman's voice. It was calm and cold and absolute. The Forsaken froze. He turned his head. Standing near one of the massive red columns was Moiraine Damodred. She looked tiny in the giant hall. She wore her blue dress, which was torn and stained with mud from the journey. Her hair was loose. She looked exhausted, but she stood straight. She held her staff in her hand. Belial looked at her and sneered. "The Aes Sedai, I wondered when you would show yourself. Did you come to watch him die, or did you come to die with him?" Moiraine did not answer. She did not monologue. She did not threaten. She simply acted. She raised her staff. She embraced Saidar. She drew as much power as she could hold. She did not weave fire or lightning or air. She wove something else. It was a weave that had been forbidden for thousands of years. It was a weave that was dangerous to the very fabric of reality. Balefire. A bar of liquid white light erupted from her staff. It was brighter than the sun. It was brighter than lightning. It didn't cast shadows because it was too intense. It was a solid beam of pure erasure. It crossed the distance to Belial in an instant. There was no sound, no whoosh, no explosion, just the sudden presence of the light. It hit Belial in the chest. The Forsaken's eyes went wide. He didn't have time to scream. He didn't have time to shield himself. Where the light touched him, he simply ceased to be. He didn't burn. He didn't explode. He just vanished. The light consumed him. It ate his body. It ate his clothes. It ate his sword. For a second, there was a silhouette of a man in the white fire. And then there was nothing. The bar of light faded. Belial was gone. He wasn't just dead. He had been burned out of the pattern. The balefire was so strong that it erased him back in time by a few seconds. The things he had done in those last few seconds were undone. Rand lay on the floor, blinking. The image of the white fire was burned into his retinas. He looked at the spot where Belial had stood. There was nothing there, not even a pile of ash, just empty air. He looked at Moiraine. She lowered her staff. She was trembling. Using balefire took a toll. It was a terrible weapon. "Is he?" Rand croaked. "He is gone," Moiraine said softly. "The Dark One cannot step outside of time to save him. He is gone forever." She took a step toward Rand to help him up. "We must go," she said. "The stone is full of enemies. We must—" She stopped. The air in the room changed. Before it had been hot and dry. Now it suddenly became freezing cold. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a second. The torches on the walls flickered and turned blue. Then they went out. The only light came from the glowing crystal sword Callandor. A sound filled the room. It was the sound of laughter. But it wasn't human laughter. It was the sound of rocks grinding together in a cavern deep underground. It was the sound of a fire roaring in a chimney. "You think you have won?" the voice boomed. Moiraine spun around. She raised her staff again. But she was too slow. From the shadows behind the columns, a figure stepped out. He was tall. He was dressed in clothes that looked like dried blood and old darkness. His face was a horror. It was a mask of burns. His eyes were not eyes. They were pits of fire. It was Baalzamon, The heart of the dark, the betrayer of hope. He did not look at Moiraine. He looked at Rand. "You kill one of my servants," Baalzamon said, "and you think it matters? I have 1,000 servants. I have 1,000 lives. You are nothing." Moiraine struck. She threw the power at him. Baalzamon didn't even raise his hand. He simply willed it. A wave of force slammed into Moiraine. It picked her up like a rag doll. It threw her across the room. She hit a stone pillar with a sickening crunch. She slid down to the floor and lay still. "Moiraine!" Rand screamed. He scrambled to his feet. He looked for his sword, but it was too far away. He was alone. Belal was gone, but something much worse had arrived. Baalzamon walked toward him. The floor tiles seemed to crack under his boots. Smoke rose from his footsteps. "I have chased you through the ages," Baalzamon said. "I have killed you 1,000 times. Do you remember Luz Therin? Do you remember the time I cut your throat in the Hall of Servants? Do you remember the time I burned you alive in the Aiel Waste? We have played this game over and over." Rand backed away. He bumped into something hard. He turned. He was standing right next to Callandor. The crystal sword was humming loudly now. It was vibrating. It knew the Dark One was here. It was reacting to the presence of the shadow. Rand looked at Baalzamon. The dark figure was closing in. He was preparing a weave that would rip Rand apart. Rand looked at the sword. He remembered Belal's words. "Take it. It will give you the strength." He remembered the prophecies. "The stone shall fall when the dragon wields the sword." He had no choice. "I am not Luz Therin," Rand shouted. "I am Rand al'Thor." He reached out. His hand closed around the hilt of the sword. The moment his skin touched the crystal, the world exploded. It wasn't a physical explosion. It was an explosion of power. Saidin slammed into him. But it wasn't the trickle he was used to. It wasn't the river he had fought before. It was an ocean. It was a tidal wave of pure energy. The sword was a sangreal. It was a device made to amplify the one power. And it was one of the most powerful sangreal ever made. The power flooded Rand's body. It filled every cell. It filled every vein. It felt like he was being inflated with light. The sickness of the taint was still there, but the sheer volume of power was so massive that it pushed the sickness aside. Rand threw his head back and screamed. It was a scream of agony and ecstasy. The power was too much. It was going to burn him out. It was going to turn him to ash. But the sword held it. The sword acted as a buffer. It allowed him to channel more power than any man could hold without dying. A column of white light erupted from Rand. It shot up through the ceiling. It went through the stone. It went through the roof of the fortress. It shot up into the storm clouds above. The light was blinding. It lit up the entire city of Tyr. For a moment inside the heart of the stone, there was no shadow. Everything was white. Rand lowered his hand. He held the sword. Callandor was glowing. It pulsed like a living heart. The blade was no longer clear crystal. It was a bar of white fire. Rand felt the power coursing through him. He felt like a god. He could see the weaves of the world. He could see the atoms in the air. He could feel the heartbeat of every person in the fortress. He looked at Baalzamon. The dark figure had stopped. For the first time, there was hesitation in those fiery eyes. "You take the toy," Baalzamon growled. "But do you know how to use it?" "I know enough," Rand said. His voice was different now. It was amplified. It sounded like thunder. Rand swung the sword. He didn't just swing it physically. He lashed out with the power. A wave of air and fire swept across the room. It was solid. It was a wall of destruction. Baalzamon threw up a shield of darkness. The two forces collided. Boom! The sound was deafening. The shockwave knocked over the heavy iron braziers. It cracked the red stone columns. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Baalzamon was pushed back. His feet dug furrows in the stone floor. "You are strong," Baalzamon admitted. Stronger than before, but strength is not enough. The dark figure began to grow. He seemed to swell. The shadows around him deepened. He was pulling on the true power which came from the Dark One himself. Rand didn't wait. He charged. He ran with the sword held high. He was fast. With the power filling him, his muscles were harder than steel. He moved faster than a striking snake. He slashed at Baalzamon. The dark figure drew a sword of his own, a sword of black fire. They clashed. White fire against black fire. Every time the swords touched, sparks of reality flew. The air sizzled. The smell of ozone was overpowering. Rand drove Baalzamon back, step by step. "Get out of my head," Rand shouted. He swung the sword. "Get out of my dreams." He swung again. Baalzamon parried, but he was losing ground. The light from Callandor was hurting him. It was burning his skin. The fight moved out of the heart of the stone. Baalzamon realized he couldn't win here. He turned and fled. He didn't run. He stepped sideways into the shadows. He was trying to enter the dream world. Tel'aran'rhiod. Rand saw him fading. "No, you don't!" Rand yelled. He struck out with the power. He used the sword to cut a hole in reality. He followed Baalzamon. The scene shifted. They were running through a twisted version of the stone. The corridors were elongated. The stairs went upside down. This was a dream shard, a pocket of reality controlled by Baalzamon. But Rand had Callandor. The sword cut through the dream. It anchored him to truth. He chased the dark figure down a long hallway of grey mist. "You cannot hide," Rand shouted. Baalzamon turned. He looked cornered. The fire in his eyes flared up. "I will destroy you," Baalzamon shrieked. "I will break the wheel and remake it in my image." He threw everything he had at Rand, a storm of black lightning. Rand didn't block it. He cut it. He swung Callandor. The blade sliced through the black lightning. It sliced through the weaves of the shadow. Rand stepped in close. He was right in front of him. He saw the burnt face clearly. He saw the madness in those eyes. "It ends," Rand said. He thrust the sword forward. The blade of white light went through Baalzamon's chest. It pierced the heart. Baalzamon stiffened. He looked down at the sword sticking out of his chest. He looked surprised. "I," he whispered. Rand twisted the blade. He felt something snap. It was like a cord being cut. He felt the connection between Baalzamon and the Dark One sever. The fire in the eyes flickered. Then it went out. The body slumped. Rand pulled the sword free. The body fell to the floor. It was just a man. A dead man in strange clothes. The dream world dissolved around them. The mist evaporated. Rand found himself back in the heart of the stone. He was standing in the center of the room. The dead body was at his feet. The silence was absolute. The humming of the sword had quieted down. It was just a soft vibration now. Rand stood there panting. The adrenaline was fading and exhaustion was crashing down on him. The power was still there filling him, but he felt heavy. He looked around. The room was a wreck. The columns were chipped and scorched. The floor was cracked. Moiraine was still lying by the pillar. Rand felt a surge of panic. He ran to her. He knelt down. "Moiraine," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. She groaned. She touched her head. "Rand?" she asked weakly. "I'm here," he said. "It's over. He's dead." Moiraine tried to sit up. She looked past Rand. She saw the body on the floor. She stared at it for a long time. "Baalzamon," she whispered. "You killed him." "Yes," Rand said. "I used the sword." He held up Callandor. It was still glowing softly. Moiraine looked at the sword and then back at Rand. There was awe in her eyes, and fear. "The prophecy," she said. "The stone has fallen." Just then there was a noise at the entrance. Rand stood up. He raised the sword ready to fight again. But it wasn't enemies. Mat Cauthon came running in. He had his quarterstaff in his hand. His hat was gone. He looked wild. Behind him were Egwene and Elaine and Nynaeve. They were dishevelled and dirty, but they were alive. and behind them came Ruark and the Aiel, scores of them, veiled warriors with spears. They all stopped when they entered the hall. They saw the destruction, they saw the cracked pillars, they saw the dead body of the Forsaken, and they saw Rand. He stood in the center of the carnage. He held the crystal sword that everyone knew could not be touched. Egwene gasped. Her hands went to her mouth. "Rand," she whispered. Mat lowered his staff. He whistled softly. "Blood and ashes," he muttered. "You actually did it. You took the bloody sword." The High Lords of Tyr were there too. They had been dragged in by the Aiel as prisoners. They were men who had spent their lives believing that the stone would never fall. They believed that the dragon was a lie or a curse. They looked at the empty space where Callandor had floated for 3,000 years. They looked at the red-haired young man holding it. One by one, the High Lords fell to their knees. They didn't kneel because they wanted to. They knelt because their world had been shattered. The prophecy was real. The dragon was here. Ruark, the clan chief of the Aiel, stepped forward. He pulled down his black veil, revealing his face. He looked at Rand with a mixture of respect and intense curiosity. "The Karakan," Ruark said. "He who comes with the dawn." Ruark knelt. Behind him, 100 Aiel warriors knelt in unison. The rustle of their clothes was the only sound in the room. Rand looked at them. He felt strange. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had just survived a shipwreck. He looked at his friends, Egwene and Nynaeve and Elaine and Mat. They were looking at him differently now. There was distance in their eyes. He wasn't just Rand from Eamon's Field anymore. He was something else. He was the dragon reborn. He felt a pang of sadness. He knew that things would never be the same. The simple life he had wanted was gone forever. He looked down at the sword in his hand. It was beautiful and terrible. "It is done," Rand said. His voice carried through the silent hall. He sheathed the sword. He didn't have a scabbard for it, so he simply held it by his side. The glow faded. It became just crystal again. Moiraine managed to stand up, using her staff for support. She walked over to Rand. "The shadow has been pushed back tonight," she said. "But the war is not over. This is only the beginning." "I know," Rand said. He walked over to the body of Baalzamon. He looked down at the burnt face. "He thought he was the Dark One," Rand said. "He called himself the Father of Lies." "He was Ishamael," Moiraine said, looking at the body. "The betrayer of hope, the chief of the Forsaken. He was mad. He believed he was the Dark One. But he was just a man. A powerful man, but a man." Rand nodded. "He is dead now." Outside the fortress, the sun was beginning to rise. The storm clouds were breaking apart. The first rays of the morning sun struck the stone of Tyr. For the first time in history, the stone belonged to the dragon. The people in the city below were coming out of their houses. They looked up at the fortress. They saw the Aiel on the walls. They saw the damage. Word began to spread. It spread like wildfire through the streets. From the mall to the palaces. The stone has fallen. The sword has been taken. The dragon is reborn. Some people wept with fear. Some wept with joy. But everyone knew that the world had changed. The wheel had turned. An age was ending and a new age was beginning. Back in the heart of the stone, Rand al'Thor turned away from the body. He looked at the open doors where the morning light was spilling in. He took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. The ozone smell was gone. He walked toward the light. His friends followed him. The Aiel followed him. He walked out of the hall and into the corridors. He walked until he reached a balcony overlooking the city. He stood there looking down at the river and the buildings. The wind blew his red hair. He was the dragon reborn. He was the breaker of the world. He was the savior. He tightened his grip on Callandor. "Let the dragon ride again on the winds of time," he whispered. The sun rose fully, bathing him in gold. And that is where we will leave our story for tonight. The prophecy was fulfilled, the sword was claimed, and Randall Thor had taken his first real step toward Tarmangaidon, the last battle. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the lore of the Wheel of Time. I hope you found the fall of the Stone of Tyr as fascinating as I do. If you are still awake and you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe for more. And now sleep well. Good night.